This video is for any of my viewers. I'm going to direct it more to the automotive people that are into restoring old vehicles. Now, it just started with a question that it's Alexa XJ699, something like that. I think it's her YouTube channel, but in a short she posed yesterday. Now, um, she was saying that she'd like to go back as stock as she can. Now, for me, that's the way I like to go, as much stock as I can. Maybe go with a slightly bigger engine if one bolts up to there. Now, I guess that's because I'm not lazy in one sense, but I'm not real good with a welder. Now, let's say you go back with a much bigger horsepower engine. Now, you got to fabricate at least the front mounts. It depends upon what tranny you use in there. A lot depends upon your choice of replacement parts. But I said, for me personally, I like to go back as stock as I can, so I'm not really modifying the frame or anything like that. The engine I drop back in there, either I take when it's in there, rebuild it, go through it, rebuild it where I know it's going to be reliable for a long period of time. Well, I'll get into rebuilding an engine here in a little bit. Like I said, where you go back with something that will bolt back in there. Now, if you go with a completely different engine, like I said, you've got to redo at least the front mounts and probably where the tranny mounts. Now, some of the much older vehicles, the rear of the engine would bolt to the frame, and then the transmission kind of hung back there. There's probably a lot of people that have never seen a vehicle like that. Now, in all the newer stuff, you got a mount at the back of the transmission and the two very front or the two side engine mounts. That's where all that stuff from old mid '60s and stuff mount up. But anyway, like I said, I like to go back as stock as I can. Another question I'd asked on a much earlier video about 4 or 5 months ago. Now, on a lowrider. Now, if if someone doesn't know what a lowrider is, I'm thinking they're probably more popular here in the Southwest U.S. They're certainly popular around here in this part of Arizona. It's a car that's you put small tires on there. A lot of guys will put hydraulics on there, so they go down the road. They're jerking up and down. They're jerking up and down like a couple is having fun in the back seat. That's the way I'll phrase it. That's kind of what they look like to me. But anyway, if you've never got a vehicle rocking from the back seat, you've certainly missed. Now, if some chick close to my age is interested in going out in the middle of nowhere and getting a vehicle really rocking, so we can sit down and talk. That's not relevant to this discussion. But anyway, let's see. I'm asking, do you go back all stock, or do you try to modify it, or maybe you take a vehicle and redo the front suspension, the front steering components like that? Maybe you take something like early '60s to whatever, pre mid '60s. When they went to the dual hydraulic brake systems, the earlier ones were just one single circuit. And if you lost one circuit, you lost your brakes. Now maybe you go with a double hydraulic system like the later ones, or maybe you put front disc brakes on an older vehicle. Yeah, I'm just saying that's not stock, but that's something you do more for safety and for better handling, that type of thing. And you're saying it's all up to the preference of an individual individual builder, or maybe you just like drum brakes on the front and you know how to drive something that's older and just kind of prepared to live with the little bit different handling characteristics that older vehicles got to have. That's something you do need to be aware of. Now, another question Alexa had asked on her earlier video, do you know how to drive a stick shift? Yeah, I learned how to drive. My parents had 2 or 3 vehicles that, that's all my father ever drove was with a standard transmission. I had a pickup that had an automatic in her. He drove it one time, and I don't know. To me, automatics are pretty easy. I had no problem just hopping it automatic, and you just push accelerator and go. You don't have to shift gears. Just put it in drive and go. To me, but my father seemed to have problems. But anyway, I think it was like a '62 GMC Suburban that had a 4-speed in there. 4-speed on the floor. It was 4-wheel drive and had the high-low transfer case on there. And I have driven, vehicles with a 3-speed column shift. Now, if you have never driven a column shift, now you got it neutral now. You go all the way up, that's reverse. All the way down, toward you all the way down is first, back to neutral. Then all the way up is second. then back to then all the way down at third. Yeah, I can still drive. I could probably hop in a vehicle with a 3-speed column shift and drive it. Now the problem those have is the linkage is always goofing up. I guess if you take it apart and clean it real good, because I know Pole Barn Garage took something 60s, early 60s Ford wagon, had a 3-speed column, went through there, and it's maybe a couple weeks back. If you go to Pole Barn Garage, and you find a 65, 62, 65 somewhere in there Ford station wagon, and he drove that from. You got to his compound there is somewhere in southern New Mexico. He drove that back to God, I can't think where it's in the eastern United States somewhere. He drove that to maybe a couple of thousand miles. So he got the linkage all figured out. But yeah, I can drive a 3-speed column. My father had a 3-speed. It was a Jeep, like a Willys station wagon. That's long gone. It's no longer there. But anyway, I had a 3-speed floor shift. Yeah, I drove that. It had a high and low transfer case on it. I've driven plenty of 4-speed floor shifts, and I had a little Toyota pickup that had a 5-speed. I don't remember if it came with a 5-speed or I found one in the wrecking yard and put that in there. I remember doing it once or twice. So I'm not quite sure. That's been a long time ago since I had that little Toyota pickup. I kept turning engines, had like a 20R, and I kept turning engines up on it, and I got tired of doing it, so I just got I had a Dodge, half-ton Dodge pickup. I've had, with an automatic in there. It had a slant 6 in there, a little 225. Now, if you had that Dodge pickup, would you go through? No, I rebuilt that little 225 in there, early 2000s. Would you take a 225, put a 318, maybe a 360 in there? Now, if you put a 360 in there, or maybe a 400, you would definitely have to go through the front end and where it would handle the extra weight, the extra horsepower. Probably put a little bit different rear end gears in there. Where it would handle the extra horsepower. That's just and let me go back to a lowrider because I covered that on my last video. Now, if you had a mid-60s car and you turn it into a lowrider, or let's say a friend of yours took a car and turned it into a lowrider. Now, if you don't know what a lowrider is, I'm sure they're here on YouTube. I think they're more popular here in the southwestern United States, but I don't know if there's too many lowriders in the eastern U.S. But if you search here on YouTube, I'm sure you can find lowriders. Now, if somebody takes an older vehicle and turns it into a lowrider, is that a crime against history? I asked that in a much earlier video about 4 or 5 months ago. When I showed a yard full of lowriders. I'm asking you now. To me, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence on that because again, I like to keep stuff as stock as I can. But is turning a car into a lowrider a crime against history? Now, if they'll usually put hydraulics on there, they'll make the car kind of bump up and down and shake and stuff. Now, to me, that's kind of like if you see a car just sitting there shaking, to me, I'm thinking there's probably a couple in the back seat kind of making it do that. I don't want to get into graphics for the kiddos here, but most adults have done the wild thing in the back seat of a car. Now, some chick close to my age is interested. We can go out in the middle of nowhere. Leave a comment on this video. We'll sit down and talk. Let's see. I think I've covered everything here. Again, I'm asking, do you go back all stock like I like to do, or do you go just slight modifications? Maybe rebuild the front end for better handling and safety and stuff? Or do you go with much horsepower and as highly modified as you possibly can just to prove you can do it? Now, there's people that like to do that. Just put as much horsepower in a vehicle just to prove they can do it. Of course, there's people that race them where they need the horsepower. That's a different story. If you're going to race at oval track or dirt or drag strip, that's a different story. Now, I've never done that. I don't know if I'd have the nerve to race something because I just spent all my time on the streets. I'm just more interested in getting to somewhere and coming back in one piece. Okay, love you. Let's keep life interesting, exciting, and all that. That one chick that maybe she's got that 65. Let's say she's got a 57 Bel Air station wagon, and just needs some guy to not only help her wrench on it to keep her warm at night, She wants someone to give her a thrill in that back seat every night or whatever. Hey, let me know. We can talk. Okay, love you. Let's keep life exciting and interesting. Bye bye.